everyone. I am really excited to talk about secondary characters today. So we're going to go around and sort of introduce ourselves and our books and talk about a little bit about some of the secondary characters that feature in our stories. So my name is Melissa Sarno. I am the author of Just Under the Clouds, see that, and A Swirl of Ocean. And I'll talk a little bit probably about A Swirl of Ocean today because it's a more recent book. And it's a story of a girl who, in trying to understand her past, because she was left on the ocean when she was 2 years old, she swallows ocean water and starts having dreams about who she might be and where she might come from. And it's a bit of a mystery. And the secondary characters in this book it's a really great friendship story, and there are two, and the kind of the role they play is one is to add a bit of humor because she is a lover of romance novels and helps my main character Summer sort of understand like that these dreams that she's having might be real because this secondary character is really into stories that are fictional. And then another character is Jeremiah, and he is someone whose past kind of walks into his life just at the moment that Summer's starting to wonder about her own past. And that's kind of the role they play.
Hi, my name is Sylvia Liu, and I have a middle grade coming out in a week, Manatee's Best Friend. And it's about a girl who is very shy and wants to save manatees in her backyard in Florida, but she has to overcome both her shyness and the effects of an accidental viral video that she puts out into the world. And my secondary characters are her two friends, well, they're acquaintances at the beginning of the story where she's put together with them in a science project, and they're very different from her. One is her new neighbor who is very confident and cocky and brash. And so she's sort of the opposite of my main character, and she sort of scares the main character. And the other character is a guy named Dion, who's the class clown, and he sort of never takes anything seriously. And so that frustrates the character as well. So they really act as sort of foils to her in my story.
That's great. So exciting to have that book coming out next week. And my name is Samantha M Clarke, and I'm the author of The Boy, the Boat, and the Beast, and then Arrow, which came out just last month, and 2 months ago, and American Horse Tales Hollywood. And actually, the secondary characters, these are kind of funny because the secondary character in Arrow is his friend, Curly, who is a monkey, and Arrow is the only human who's grown up in this magically hidden rainforest, and the whole story is narrated by the guardian tree of the rainforest. They're trying to hide it and to keep it safe from deforestation, and when humans from the arid, dry outside world finally find the rainforest because the magic has been depleted, then Arrow has to try and save the day as well as his friend Curly, who I really love. And then in American Horse Tales, I have another secondary character who's an animal, who's her horse Abel, which kind of makes sense because it's American Horse Tales. Saadia, how about you?
Hello, everyone. I'm Saadia Faruqi. You may know me from the Yasmin series, which is kind of like my claim to fame. People don't realize I write other books too. But I'm going to talk about my middle grade novel, 1,000 Questions, that, man, these cameras are all wonky. This one came out last year. It is a story of two girls, and it's set in my birthplace of Karachi, Pakistan. The two girls are both main characters. They both have the main character voice in the book, but there are a lot of other secondary characters. There's Mimi's mom, there's Sakina's dad, there's a whole bunch of people that are kind of really setting the stage of what this friendship story is about. And it's something that's important to me whenever I write any books, including my Yasmin books. Secondary characters are almost as important as the main character, because you just, how do you interact with those people? What did they bring to the story? Those are all really important questions for me. So.
Hi, gang. I'm Stacy McAnulty, coming to you from my home office in North Carolina. I know we might all be zoomed out, but technology is great because it's connecting all us ladies and all you viewers. So I think it's still kind of awesome. My claim to fame book, I guess, is The Miscalculations of Lightning Girl. And my newest novel is Millionaires for the Month. Two boys are tasked with spending $5 million in a month. It is not a reward, it is a challenge. Now, the secondary characters in this book, they don't know it's a challenge. So they were super fun to write about because they don't know exactly what's going on. But imagine if you saw two boys, two 12-year-old boys, spending $5 million in a month, the reaction of the secondary characters are kind of the way we'd all react. And they really help us look at finances and money and value and all that in our society. So they add so much, and they were so much fun to write.
Hi, everybody. My name is Victoria Piantek, and I am the author of 2 middle grade novels. The first is The Spirit of Cactus County. This is a ghost story. And I went from ghost to goats. My new middle grade novel is called Better with Butter. It's about a girl who's struggling with anxiety and having to deal with anxiety, and she does not feel very brave. And then one day she has to kind of help herself feel brave, and she rescues a fainting goat named Butter, who actually happens to be my secondary character. And Butter plays a really important part because through Butter, Marvel learns a lot about her anxiety. But there are also 2 other important secondary characters in this novel, and that's Marvel's parents, who are the people who love her and are watching her deal with her anxiety on the outside. So I think they play a really important role in the novel to sort of be like to mirror back to Marvel sort of what she's doing and to try and help her find her way forward. So that's me.
All these books sound amazing, and I can't wait to read so many of the new ones. So I'll kick us off with the first question, because I'm curious, especially from Victoria, as you just talked about the adults in your book. I think for a long time there's been sort of this like inclination when you say children's books, like banish the parents or banish the adults from the story and let the kids take over. And I think I've noticed in sort of recent years that adults are like stepping into stories a little bit more, because I think they're important to middle graders and our readers in their, like adults are important in their lives. And so exploring the importance of adults in children's books in the children's lives is really interesting. So I'm just sort of curious to hear from some of you how you handle adults in your story. For me, in A Swirl of Ocean, I cannot hold this book properly. There we go. In A Swirl of Ocean, Summer, like I said, has been left at the ocean shore when she was 2 years old and adopted by a woman named Lindy, who when she found her was only 21 years old. So Lindy is kind of a sisterly, a more sisterly character. So she's kind of the adult in the book. And she's a bit of a, I guess you would say she's sort of a catalyst for the story, because her boyfriend is set to move in to their home. And this kind of makes Summer sort of wonder what her place is. And like I said, at the same time, she swallows this ocean water and starts having these strange dreams that are going to sort of connect her to her past. So I would say that the adults kind of act as a catalyst, but Lindy's also a sisterly figure and a friend to her. And she's kind of questioning how their relationship is going to change. So Victoria, I'm really curious to hear what, how the adults kind of enrich your story.
Yeah, there are the two main adults, the mom and the dad. The dad is actually away at the start of the book and comes back. His job, he is a Navy captain, and so he spends a lot of time away. And so again, like you said, it's a catalyst for the novel. And I think because her dad only has a short time with her, he is able to help her see some things that she would otherwise not see, and becomes a catalyst for questioning who she is. And the other character that I think is fun in the novel is actually Marvel's mom, who is the primary caregiver there. And the one that kind of carries the weight of Marvel's anxiety and Marvel's mental health and managing that. And that was really important for me to put in because this is a very personal story. So I do have anxiety, and I also parent children with anxiety. So I think those adult roles are really, really important in the story. And it's interesting when you're writing them because it's so easy for an adult to swoop in and fix everything. So I feel like that's the balance when you're writing middle grade, is like to have the kids interacting with the adults, but not necessarily taking over the story or making things too easy. So it's kind of a balance trying to create a believable adult who also isn't, like, oh my goodness, you're acting, you can't do that. Like, stop that, because you also
That's kind of the golden rule, right? The golden rule of middle grade is the adult does not come in and fix the problem. They can be aware, they can lead, they can do all that, but they do not fix the problem. So to do that, especially for those of us who are parents or caregivers, it's what we want to do in our real life. But then in the book world, we don't want to go there.
No, you definitely can't.
Yeah, I guess like for me, my stories, the parents definitely are a little bit more like the traditional middle grade parents, somewhat absent. but the adult figures, I do have both the manatee's best friend, and in a year I have a science fiction book coming out. The grandparent figures actually play a role, and so in both of those stories, I have a grandparent who is an ally and a mentor, and I really like to highlight that multi-generational link because sometimes, like the parent themselves are too, like our own relationship sometimes show, right? We are too close to the situation, but like, our parents, the grandparents may have a wider view. And so that's sort of the dynamic that happened in my story.
I think it's super important to show adults being helpers like you're doing with the grandma. I think that's really nice.
Okay, so I have a question. How do secondary characters contribute to the mood of your book? This is kind of similar to what we've been talking about. For me in particular, in 1,000 Questions, there are a couple of secondary characters that are really, really big on the screen or the page. One is Mimi's dad, who is absent throughout the book and has been throughout her life until the very end. But she, as the title suggests, has thousands of questions for him, which she writes in her journal. So there are journal entries throughout the book in which she's addressing her dad. So we get to see so much about her dad, who has left her and her mom high and dry. And it makes up so much of her personality, and it's one of the plots in the book. So even though he's not there, his character's kind of there. And then there's her grandma, who is very much a snob and very much the adult version of a mean girl, although she does find redemption at the end. But Mimi learns a lot about her heritage and her culture, the good and the bad aspects from her grandmother, more than anyone else. So definitely that is something that was there in my book. How about you? Anyone else want to go? Maybe Stacy, how do the secondary characters contribute to the mood of your book?
Sure, that's a great question. Secondary characters are so versatile. They can change the mood in a minute, because in our POV characters were in their head, so many thoughts, so many concerns. Then you bring in this secondary character, and they can be a class clown. We're not super close to them. We might not know all their baggage, but they can be dropping jokes. They can really lighten the mood. That's one of the things I like to use them for a lot, is it's kind of lighten the mood, especially if it's something heavy, something very emotional. In Millionaires, one of my secondary characters, the boys hire an Uber driver to be their chauffeur, and he is a philosophy grad student at the University of Albany, so he's dropping some philosophy all the time. And then the boys, joke back because they have philosophy too, but they get theirs from Marvel movies. So with great with great power comes great responsibility. So they have some fun discussions. We don't know a ton about Reggie, our chauffeur. We get little bits and pieces, but he can really change the mood, change the perspective, just by driving them to Wendy's to get some Frosties. It's really, amazing what we can do with these secondary characters.
I love that. So true.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I agree that like the secondary characters sort of round out the world of the story, so they really, especially, in any genre, but they basically tell the reader more about the world of, like if it's a school setting, it's the kids. If it's a fantasy, it's, the characters they meet and stuff. So, and I do think they can actually reflect or be foils for the main character, show the opposite, or they can be mirrors. The main character can see parts of themselves in a secondary character. So, and then as Stacy mentioned, the mood, it totally you can lighten the mood. If you bring in a really creepy character, it, changes the mood that way.
Yeah, a secondary character can be a kind of a bad guy too, right? Or the bully, the mean girl. And if you pop those in, that's taking us down. Not always lightening the mood, but ruining maybe a good moment.
Yeah, definitely. And at different times and in different scenes. And Sylvia, you had talked about setting too, and where your setting is, and that in itself can be a secondary character a lot of the times. I use setting a lot as character in my books. I mean, for Arrow, it's this hidden rainforest, and for this one, it's this hidden rainforest, and the whole story is narrated by the Guardian Tree, who is a character in her own sense in the entire book. And then there's also this arid outside world that you don't really see, but you hear a lot about. So that idea of so a lot of the secondary characters are coming from this world, but it's also the way Arrow is interacting with this setting. So so that setting kind of becomes this character in itself, I think too. How about you guys? Does anyone else like Melissa, maybe how you do? I know you do a lot of setting stuff in your books too, with that are like characters as well.
Yeah, I love setting as character. I think setting can do so much, when we talked a little bit about mood before, I think it can really change the mood of a book, and the setting itself can become like we talked about the sort of like there could be a bully in the story. The setting could be a bully. In A Swirl of Ocean, setting is so important because the ocean is sort of this place for Summer where she thinks she's going to find answers, but the ocean is also very sort of unknowable. It's mysterious, it's deep. And so I love sort of playing with this idea that the world around you can hold on to maybe answers or a history or a past. But at the same time, it may not give you the answers you need. Or I wanted to sort of play with that in the story. So I love setting as character and think it can act as, one of the more intriguing characters in a book. What about you, Saadia? Because you said you wrote about your home.
Yeah, my ex-home, my old home. Yeah, so 1,000 Questions is set in Karachi, Pakistan, the city that I was born in and grew up in for the first 22 years of my life before I came to the US. And so, and actually, if you look at the book itself, you will see all these buildings all across. These are actual buildings in Karachi.
That
Most
is
of which I know, and I was so shocked when I saw this cover. It was a total surprise to me that the artist had done this. In fact, this one,
so cool.
this building is actually a cathedral that was outside my school that I passed through. I've passed in front of every single day of my life until I left high school. So, needless to say, very special in terms of what I was trying to do with this book was showcase my birth country to American readers in particular. And it's kind of like a love letter to my past. It's got the two main characters, Mimi and Sakina, actually, it's because Mimi is visiting. One of Sakina's jobs, which she hates, is that she has to take this spoiled American rich kid around and be like the host and show her everything. And so you see everything there is to see in the city through my eyes, through the eyes of a local, and also from the eyes of a tourist. And all the places I visited as a kid, all the foods I ate, all the restaurants I stopped at, the street foods I ate, they're all in here. And it's just everybody who's read this book so far has I'm so glad has told me that they could feel the setting come alive. I don't feel it's more a character, but it's just the surroundings of where you are and what it brings out to you. And for Mimi, it's kind of understanding where she's from or where her family's from that she had no clue about.
So it's definitely feeding those characters.
Yeah. And me.
I love reading about food. Like sometimes food is definitely a secondary character, right?
Yes.
Oh my God. So. I mean, if in A Place at the Table, my other middle grade, which has a food competition, that's definitely, you would say food is and I love food is such a big part of our culture, for any culture, that I think that I loved writing about it in that respect, for sure.
Definitely.
I know. I love too how you talk about how you have two different perspectives too, like the newcomer or the outsider and sort of the person whose home place it is. And I love the way you balance those characters off each other so you can see, both versions of it. And I imagine there's probably a friendship that forms at some point. And speaking of friendships, what are your favorite friendships in middle grade? Melissa, do you want to start us off? Or do you have a favorite friendship, middle grade friendship?
Yeah, I kind of recently I started rereading some books that I loved as a kid to see sort of if they hold up. And I'm a huge fan of Emily of New Moon, which is by L.M. Montgomery. I think most people have read Anne of Green Gables, but the reason I have always loved Emily is because she's a writer, and that's the story. She's a dreamer, and so I've always connected to her even more than Anne, although I love Anne. But Emily's best friend in the story, her name is Ilsa, and she is just a spitfire. And I love their relationship because the joke about Ilsa is that she's just like totally out of control. Her parents have no control over her. Her father sort of ignores her and blames her for the disappearance of her mother, which is a whole other story. But the best thing about Ilsa is that she sort of takes Emily to task. And sometimes she'll fly off the handle for absolutely no reason. And then Emily leaves this fight that they've had, or this catastrophe that Ilsa leaves in her wake and thinks, oh, our relationship is over, our friendship is over, or she sort of prepares how she's going to respond to her friend and apologize, and then Ilsa will just be like, what, it didn't mean anything. And I sort of love that like playfulness between them and how it challenges Emily as a character and how their friendship kind of grows. And I just love that like push and pull between characters. And I think a secondary character really can bring that out. I don't know if anyone else has any favorite middle grade friendships, but.
I love friendship stories in general. So I don't really have any, there's not one that stands out. I gravitate to reading and writing friendship stories. So I can think of, say, Amina Khan, Henna Khan's story where Amina's voice, which has Amina and her friend Sujin. I mean, I don't know. It's just something that is so special about kids finding friends that often other people don't want to be friends with. I think that's just something that I feel so strongly about, or a friendship that has trouble, but then you're able to kind of salvage that in some way. And my particular kind of forte in this book, as well as in A Place at the Table, is people who are friends who nobody thinks will be friends because they're so different. And I mean, as a concept, that's so important to me, that we make friends with people who are different from us and who we may not feel that we have something in common with, but we make an effort in our friendship and try to be friends with somebody. So no, nothing stands out, but yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Yeah, so go ahead.
I was just going to completely agree with that. That like my favorite friendship stories are the unlikely friends. You know, the kids you wouldn't think at the beginning of a story would become friends, but because through their joint efforts in the story, they end up becoming friends. I just had a couple recent ones that I read that recent books like Clues to the Universe by Christina Lee is a great such friendship story of unlikely friends. There's a girl who just wants to build rockets, and that's her goal. She's very single-minded, and there's a boy who's a little bit geeky. He's an artist. He draws comics, and his goal is to find his father, who's been missing in his life. And they're sort of put together, and they end up becoming really great friends. Another example is The Verdigris Pawn by Alyssa Wishengrad. It's a fantasy, but they have the main character. Well, there's a couple main characters, but one of them is like a very privileged heir to the king of the land, and then he ends up like meeting or getting in touch with this young girl who's like the opposite. She's from a lowborn girl, but she ends up having magical powers, and the two of them basically end up fighting injustice in the land, and she teaches him a lot about his own country. So those are some examples of just like the unlikely friendships. Victoria, you were going to say something? Oh wait,
you're on mute.
And I'm only coming back on to say, no, I was just going to say that I agree with both of you about the uniqueness and specialness of middle grade friendships. So I was just cheering you on with what you said.
Yeah, we're talking about these unlikely friendships and these blossoming friendships. For our writers out there, they're listening in, and you guys as writers, if you've read Save the Cat, the book, it's a screenwriting book, but now they have one about novels, and they call it buddy love. And it's the same thing that's in romances. It's about that building, that trust, seeing that relationship. And I wasn't smart enough to realize that before I read Save the Cat. Maybe everybody else already knows that, but that buddy love, it's instinctual to us. It's something that we cling to, whether it's, making friends in sixth grade or finding a romance at 26. It's a part of our lives forever, and how we find other people and relate to them. It's really kind of neat. So if you're a writer and you're doing a buddy love, check out Save the Cat. I highly recommend. Okay, let's get fuzzy. Let's get in some fleas here. So many of us mentioned at the beginning, the love of the animals, having characters that are non-human. I joke with my agent that I think I've had dogs in like most of my books. If they were, in my fiction books, I have some nonfiction. In my novels, there's dogs in all three of them. And in these two, they play a big role in the plot. Like if you took out Freebie and you took out Pie, there's no plot. So they're super important to me. And I am the mom of 3 dogs, including a pandemic puppy. They may run in here any minute. They can open the door. So maybe you'll see them before the end. But dogs are important in my life. Dogs are important in my books. They come to life. It's the part that the kids cry over. It's the part that, readers have gotten mad. I thought you were going to kill fill in the blank. So that they relate to that. They have pets or they want pets, or just that, I think, good humans naturally love animals. So we put them in there, and I think it's a super important aspect to stories, especially to kids' books. Victoria, tell us about your goats.
My goat. Well, it's so funny that you say you have dogs in all your books. I have been trying to put a goat in a book for forever. And she finally got like the supporting role in this book. And the great thing, like you were talking about, like that buddy love, that super connection. And I think one of the fun things that that furry characters can do is they can bring a lot of empathy to a character and for a character. And again, they can also be a mirror. So of what is happening. And like in this book, Butter is literally a fainting goat. So she is the epitome of like genetically born to like have anxiety. So when something scares her, she falls over. And it was just such a perfect mirror of what Marvel was feeling on the inside, to have that on the outside, because anxiety is so in your head. It really allowed me to kind of take something that was very cerebral and give it sort of a physical manifestation in this goat, and also to do that like buddy love kind of thing. And Sam, I know you like have tons of animals, furry friends in your stories as well.
I do. And actually, I mean, it's funny because as we were talking, I was thinking I have animal sidekicks in every single one of my books, and I use them actually in different ways, which is fun, I think. So for The Boy, the Boat, and the Beast, it has this owl. And in this book, the boy is the only character for the majority of the book. And the owl really kind of helped to bring out another character, for one, but also it was a mirror character. The book's all about fear, so the boy is trying to overcome his fear, and the owl during this big storm, this baby owl comes in, and the boy, and it's terrified and it's shivering, and so the boy has to kind of find his own courage so that he can save this owl. With Curly, that I talked about earlier in Arrow, with Curly, it was more because Arrow is the only human inside this rainforest. He's got to have some friends, and who's he going to be best friends with? Well, a monkey, of course, because if you're living in a rainforest, why wouldn't you be best friends with a monkey? I mean, come on. And Curly is completely his own character. It's like they have this really good bond. Like, so I have 2 dogs, and I can tell what they're thinking. I can tell what they want, even though my dog right now is staring at me because she really wants another greenie and she's not going to get it. And I know that's what she wants. So with Curly, even though I exaggerated things a bit to make the character, I really think that there's that bond between humans and animals. And that was actually what came with the American Horsetail series. It was all about, the whole series is all about that bond between girls and horses. So it was great fun to be able to explore that more, and it uses those animal characters in a different in different ways. So I love talking about writing animal characters as well. I do that a lot. It's a great question, Stacy.
Yeah, and actually, my book Manatee's Best Friend is actually the manatee actually and the dolphin actually in my story have an unlikely friendship, and so that is something that was really fun to. I actually had to do some research because I wanted to make that friendship happen, but I actually had to go and look, have there been instances where manatees and dolphins interact? And,
wow.
I ended up like finding a graduate school paper, like someone did research in Belize, and they did find there were like interactions between dolphins and manatees.
Like,
so
you couldn't have them being mortal enemies. That would just natural predators or something.
But that was enough for me to be able to say, okay, it's realistic enough that I can have them become friends.
Oh my gosh, I love animal friendships. I don't know if anyone knows, but I have a new series coming next year called Must Love Pets from Scholastic, and it is about animal friendship. So in every story, these girls they have pet sitting, and then a pet sitting business, and then there are two animals that kind of become friends. So Victoria, there's a goat in one. Which, I did so much research on goat. I'm sure you know too. Some of them have rectangular pupils. OMG, yes. I just freaked out about that, and I had to put it in the book. So yeah.
Okay, we're gonna have to do a whole goat tour.
Oh my God. Yeah, but I did a lot of research, Sylvia, as well about different animal friendships, and it was the most fun time of my of my writing career, and especially during the pandemic. It's been very fun doing that.
Yeah, no, that's what's also fun, because I finding out all these tidbits about manatees, I just like drop them in, the story. Now I have a question.
You have to do that. You have to be like, I have a responsibility to my readers to give them all this weird information that I found.
That's right, and it builds up those secondary characters with the animals, by adding in those details. Yeah. Details are huge, I think, with those secondary characters. We don't want to ignore them, even with the animal, the furry and feathery ones.
Yeah. So I have a question. Maybe all of us can answer this, because we've been talking about how we create secondary characters and how they populate our stories. But like for writers, what are like your best craft tips for creating secondary characters that come to life? And I guess for me, one of the things I really like about secondary characters is that you can really make them pop, right? So when they first come in, I like to give them a really memorable entrance, because you usually are telling the story from the point of view character, but you can create some like really unique personality traits, or what they're wearing, or something, that the main character will notice. And so that tells us something about both the secondary character and the main character, right? Because how the main character reacts to that memorable entrance is something I like to do. And then another sort of tip that I've told a lot of people that I like to do is, when you're trying to round out and flesh out those secondary characters, I like to pick a personal trait of my own that is maybe a little negative, and then also one that I think is positive, and then imbue that into a secondary character. And the reason that works is because you're writing what you know, right? So if you have somebody who's very picky about food, because you're picky about food, you know how to write that, right? So that's another way to round out a secondary character. I guess shall we just go around, or who would like to say their tip?
I can jump in. I think my oh wait, I had a tip in my mind while you were talking, and now it's completely left my head. So if somebody else wants to jump in, go ahead.
Okay, I'll jump in. So I think those are picking up on what you said, Sylvia. I think the secondary characters, making them pop, I think that's great. I think make them pop, and make them pop big. Again, we don't get in their head. We don't know everything that's going on. So I think you make them a little bit, I don't want to say a caricature, but yeah, take those things, make them bigger. Also something that I did as a little exercise that was kind of fun. I had watched Maggie Stiefvater's video series on writing, and it's brilliant. It's out there on Etsy. I highly recommend it. It's one of the best things I've seen on writing a novel. And she talked about the secondary characters, and I did this little exercise where I took everybody in my life and I wrote them as secondary characters. So I took my husband, and how would I describe him coming on in 3 lines? I have 4 girlfriends that I've been friends with forever, and we're raising our kids, side by side, and I know them very well. And same thing, just a couple lines. And what sticks out, this one is very meticulous, and she's picking where we're going for dinner, and this one's very laid back, this one's likely to cry. So just do that with your family and friends. Maybe not show them what you wrote up, but just get into that habit of the, like what Sylvia said, making them pop right away. And we can do this, and it's kind of a fun exercise to play with the people in your life to build that muscle.
Definitely. I thought of my thing, and it was about motivation. So one of the things that I do a lot, because if I get lost in a scene, which happens to me a lot when I'm writing a novel, is at the beginning of every chapter, I'll write the motivations of the main character for this particular scene. We know what the main character wants from the beginning of the novel. We know their goal, we know their need, but what is happening in this scene, because those motivations are going to be changing. So with the secondary characters too, I try to make their motivations either parallel, so that they're kind of helping the main story and the main character, or adjacent to it, so that they're becoming an obstacle to it. So I'll kind of write, what those motivations are at the beginning of each scene, and kind of how those secondary characters can either help or hurt the or add to the plot as well as I'm going on. So that was my tip.
I'm so glad you actually. Oh, sorry. I'm so glad you shared that tip, actually, Sam, because that kind of piggybacks on what I was thinking too, is like the idea of, or the tip to give secondary characters their complete arc, like to actually give them a small story of their own, and even do that with sort of your bad secondary characters. And Better with Butter, Marvel's nemesis is this boy named Jamie, and he does have his own story that you don't really see till the end, but it's nice to just give them a little bit of their story. And I feel like if you develop your secondary characters, at least in your head, as much as your other characters, so you know what they're motivating, then you can kind of give them a complete arc as well, and it makes the story feel like it's super complete in the end. So, and Melissa, I stepped all over you when you were trying to talk, so I'm so sorry.
No, you're totally fine. It's always so hard on these like digital to know who's gonna, I don't know. It's always like, but no, I was gonna say that I think one of the most helpful things that a mentor once told me was that all of the characters in the book are kind of like a web, and they're all helping one another get to where they need to get to. And I always have that image in my head when I start a novel of just where are the points of the web, and how are they going to bring one another to where they need to be. And I kind of actually love it. It feels like a very sort of seamless, a weave, some kind of woven quilt or something. And I kind of now just love that, step back and say, how am I going to weave everyone together, and how are they going to help one another move forward? So yeah, I feel like giving their character their own arc is really important, and then how do the arcs complement one another and parallel and adjacent? I love all of that.
Yeah, I love that. Saadia, how about you? What's your tip?
I do what all of you do. I actually treat each of my characters as equally important, even though they're not main characters. So I interview in my without talking aloud, so my kids don't think I'm nuts. Each of my characters, and they all have motivations that I write down. So even people you only see for a couple pages, I know everything about them. And I think that you all do that too. So a lot of times people who are new writers, they tend to disregard the secondary characters, but don't do that, because they're in their own minds, they have their own stories. And even if you can see glimpses of that, it'll make your writing richer, like Victoria said. So yeah, I got interview sheets for all of that, or rap sheets for the villains. I don't know.
I love that. And like Sylvia said at the beginning, the secondary characters build out that world. And if those secondary characters aren't real to the reader, then the whole world won't be real to the reader. The secondary characters are just as important as those main characters.
Another tip I just thought of actually is sometimes like if a scene is not quite working, I will actually rewrite the scene from the other character's point of view. And so I had a situation that was like a mom and, you know, daughter scene, and I wrote it from the mom's point of view. And all of a sudden I like knew so much more about why the mom was angry at that moment, what was her feeling. And then like when I flipped it around, you know, I deleted all the internal, you know, like POV of the mother, but I could sort of, it still came out, you know, through her dialogue. And then I think that became more rich that way.
That's a good
That
idea.
Yeah, that's such a great tip, I think.
That is
And
a
the-
really great tip.
And the one tip I thought of too, sorry to jump in, is also you don't have to have this all figured out in your first draft. Just remember this, we go through many, many drafts before we get those well-rounded secondary characters. So, you know, I used to think that writers had it all figured out and then just sat down and wrote it from beginning to end. And I was like, how are they so smart? And then I realized, oh, they revise.
Yes. I wish we were that smart.
Yeah.
And if anybody does get it done in the first draft, we don't want to know you.
Right, exactly. We really don't.
Well, thank you guys. This was so fun. I'm going to rewatch this because I wasn't taking notes. That would seem rude, but great tips, and I learned a lot.
I did too. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's so fun to like see your faces, some of you who I've interacted with a lot, but not actually talked with.